Welcome back. True crime and horror stories are my focus on this channel, and many of you have suggested your stories and ideas with me, which led me down this rabbit hole. So tonight, after a long absence, I'll be sharing some of my favourite hometown horrors from across the world. In Larchwood, Iowa, a town that borders South Dakota, is a wildlife preserve called Gitche Manitou. In the preserve are Native American burial mounds, so the park is rumoured to have bad energy. However, any ancient supernatural shenanigans seem to be outspooked by the events that occurred in 1973. In mid-November of that year, 3 brothers attacked a group of 5 teenagers, one being a 13-year-old girl, who were hanging around by a campfire smoking weed. The 3 brothers grabbed shotguns from their vehicle and shot 2 of the teenagers, killing 1 instantly. The other 3 teenagers ran and hid in the trees until the 3 brothers ordered them to emerge, claiming to be police officers. Again, one of the teenagers was shot, but was only injured. The brothers forced these 3 toward the trail and the road, away from the campfire. The young girl was taken to one of the victims' vans, along with the first teenager that was injured from being shot. He was taken back to the trail eventually. This left the young girl alone with one of the brothers, and the remaining 3 young men with the other 2 brothers. The 2 brothers shot the 3 teenagers with their shotguns and joined their brother further down the road. When the 3 brothers were reunited, they drove to a farm in their pickup truck. At this point, one of the brothers raped the teenage girl. Afterward, the brothers drove her home in the early morning, claiming that she was too young to get busted for weed. All 3 brothers are currently serving life without parole in Iowa. The young girl is still alive and recently has told a story of the slaying that night. North of Salt Lake City, Utah, where Ted Bundy terrorized innocent women between 1974 and 1975, Ogden experienced its own tragedy. On April 22, 1974, 6 men held up a hi-fi store on Washington Boulevard. 2 of the men took the 2 employees, 20-year-old Stanley Walker and 19-year-old Michelle Ansley, down to the basement, while the other 3 robbed the store. The last man stayed in the getaway vehicle. 16-year-old Courtney Nesbitt was the next hostage to be taken down to the basement after he entered the store to thank the employees for letting him use the parking bay at the back, followed by Stanley Walker's dad, 43-year-old Orrin, after popping in to check on his son. After her son, Courtney, hadn't returned to the car, Carol Nesbitt, aged 52, came into the store to see what was going on. As soon as she did, she was bound and gagged and taken down to the basement with the others. The hostages were forced to drink liquid Drano under the guise of vodka and sleeping pills, which immediately caused blisters to those who drank it. Each person suffered burns to their tongues and throats, and flesh peeled away from their mouths and oozed in pus. Seeing the instant effects and being the last to be served the drink, Orrin Walker let some of it drain out of his mouth and mimicked the screams and convulsions of the other victims. The perps then tried to stop the hostages screaming by taping their mouths with duct tape, but the blisters stopped the adhesive from sticking. Carol and Courtney Nesbitt and Aaron and Stan Walker were then shot. Michelle was stripped and raped repeatedly by the men, then also shot. Orrin was found to still be alive and not suffering from the Drano like the other victims, so was strangled by one of the men with some wire around his neck. When that failed, the man placed a pen in his ear and stomped on it. The men eventually left, and miraculously, Orrin Walker and Courtney and Carol Nesbitt survived the whole ordeal. However, Carol succumbed to her injuries a short time later in hospital, and Courtney has brain damage. Of the 6 men, only 3 were ever identified and convicted. They were Dale Selby Pierre, William Andrews, and Keith Roberts. They were stationed at the nearby Hill Air Force Base. The first 2 men were executed in 1987 and 1992 respectively, and the latter was sentenced for robbery as he was the getaway driver. Orrin Walker stood trial against the men and lived until around 2005. The inspiration of the movie Ladder 49 happened right in my adopted hometown of Worcester, Mass. On December 3rd, 1999, a near 100-year-old abandoned building on Franklin Street in the heart of the city caught on fire that evening and was eventually detected by an off-duty police officer and firefighter. Sources suggest that 2 homeless people had knocked over a candle and escaped the building without reporting the fire. Firefighters received reports that homeless people lived inside, so they searched each of the 15,000 square feet floors, which were divided into a labyrinth of connecting meat lockers, and with no windows except for the stairwells, and with the walls and ceilings covered in layers of cork, tar and foam, the building quickly deteriorated, killing 6 firefighters inside. It took 8 days for the remains to be found inside the building. In the 1930s, a mannequin in a wedding dress shop in Chihuahua, Mexico called La Popular surprised people for how realistic her hair, lashes, eyes and skin tone looked. It surprised people for their level of detail and realism. For a small wedding shop, it's understandable to see why people started suspecting something sinister about the eerie similarities between the mannequin and a real-life person, particularly anyone who knew the shop owner in person. The mannequin looked a lot like the shop owner's recently deceased daughter. According to legend, tragedy struck her daughter on the day of her wedding after a black widow bit the bride, resulting in her death. Her mother, the shop owner, was so struck by grief, she embalmed her daughter's body to preserve her. When the mother was accused of this, she denied it, replying that it was just a very detailed mannequin. To this day, the mannequin, referred to as La Pascualita, still exists and has attracted numerous visitors from all over the world. The mannequin's pale skin, veiny hands, and worn nails make many people more than convinced that La Pascualita is not really a doll, but an embalmed corpse. "14-year-old Marcy Renee Conrad was strangled to death by Anthony Jacques Broussard, 2 years her senior. Anthony stood 6 feet 4 and weighed about 280 pounds. They both attended Milpitas High School at the time. It's not definitive what the relationship was between the two. Friends say they dated but wanted to keep the sexual relationship hidden from Marcy's mother, and others say they were just friends. Regardless, Marcy's mother didn't like Broussard and warned her daughter to steer clear of him. After strangling Marcy to death, Broussard then drove her body up to the hills and dumped her there. What makes this story even more sickening is that Broussard bragged about her death and took numerous of his fellow high school students on tours to see Marcy's dead body. What's even worse is that each one of the students neglected to notify police. 2 students notified police after 2 days, and Broussard was eventually arrested and sentenced. Broussard got 25 years to life, but would have been eligible for parole after 16 years and 8 months, after it was revealed that he raped Marcy before strangling her to death, and that was part of his pattern. 2 more of his rape victims, 13 and 14, lived in the community and could have brought charges. Their parents, however, decided to spare them the trauma of testifying. He was denied a new trial in 1985 and is currently an inmate at Solano State Prison, where he spends much of his time in protective custody. As the story made news across the country, one of the reporters, Glenn F. Bunting, reported that teenagers he interviewed poked Marcy's body with a stick, ripped off a radio station patch from her jeans, and covered the corpse with leaves to give Broussard a head start. The movie River's Edge, starring Keanu Reeves, is loosely based on the events of this case. Thank you guys for suggesting the ideas and stories for this video and for the other videos to follow. If you'd like to see more, subscribe to the channel so you'll get the notifications, and it'll also mean a lot to me if you hit like on this video, as it gives me an indication if you learn something new or agree with the facts, and it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Drop me a comment if my research is off or you want to say hi, give me a dislike as well. I want to at least get the best information to everyone as possible, so if there's something off, you're more than welcome to drop me a comment. Cheers guys.